if necessary.
Super, that's fantastic. So now we should be on a live stream. Let me just check if...
And will I be able to share the screen if necessary or not?
Yes, absolutely. 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 Give me just a second to check whether we are live or not. I think it should hopefully work. So where do we have the... Yeah, now we are live. Alex, it's good to see you. You are live directly from the World's Government Summit. Did I get it right?
That's correct. So I'm dialing in from the World Government Summit. I apologize for any background noise because I had to step out of the meeting. And here it's there are no meeting spaces. So very happy to connect. My name is Alex Zhavoronkov. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Insilico Medicine, which is a global company. So that's why I am in the Middle East right now. One of our sites is in Abu Dhabi, which is a fantastic place to set up. And right now I'm presenting from Dubai.
What is the World Government Summit all about?
It's all about bringing together world leaders from all around the world to ensure that they can achieve common goals. They also invite business people and scientists to ensure that they have the support from the private and public sector for all kinds of discussions about the environment, healthcare, and other areas where global collaboration is extremely important.
So it's practically similar to the World Economic Forum. That's
correct. It's the Middle East version of that. Yeah,
it's the same thought. It's a good thing to have that we are part of the summit now with this podcast. So it's thanks for coming online, Alex. I read in your bio. Let's jump right into it and into what you're doing with Insilico research. I found a lot of articles on the internet where you describe that you come from longevity research. I think we have that in common. I did something similar, not in the academic field, more in the field of martial arts, because the most important question I had was, it was back in the 90s, how can I avoid to get sick? And since in the 90s in Austria, there was not many people really interested in that topic. I switched more to martial arts to find how I can improve my life. And now it's called, I think, longevity research. What did you do in this field?
So I am participating in this field more from the academic perspective, rather than from the perspective of self-improvement. I think that longevity in general is probably the most impactful field anybody can be focused on, right? Because if you figure out a way to extend the life of people just by 1 year for everybody on the planet, you generate 8 billion life years, right? So that's more than any surgeon or a doctor can achieve in their lifetime. So I am focused on the discovery of novel therapeutics that may address certain hallmarks of aging. So we look at both protein target discovery, so identifying the various possible protein switches that might be important in aging and longevity. And then we also have a way to design novel therapeutics, novel small molecule drugs that go after those targets. So we have kind of two hands. One searches for promising areas to intervene in, and another hand which allows you to very rapidly generate chemical matter that can be turned into a drug. And for that, I study and I contribute to research in artificial intelligence that works both in biology and chemistry. We have a platform called Pharma AI at Insilico that helps accelerate drug discovery R&D. But many of the programs that we go after are in age-associated diseases and longevity. We also contributed quite a bit to the development of a variety of what is called aging clocks. the biomarkers of aging utilizing artificial intelligence. So you can actually train deep neural networks or other AI models that allow you to predict chronological age in a healthy state of the patient. Let's call it biological age, or you could predict subjective age, so how old do you feel, or even some other features like, for example, perceived age, how old do other people think you are, right? If you are talking about imaging biomarkers or psychological biomarkers. So we can look at many different data types to build those comprehensive age predictors. And later we can design certain interventions for biomarkers that could yield valuable targets, either protein targets or even sometimes non-biological targets. So looking at both, again, interventions and diagnostic applications.
That's a great thing. I found your company when I was doing some research on LinkedIn about another topic, ChatGPT, and then I came across an article that Regina Hoditz liked, where you basically compare your solution in drug development and drug discovery to ChatGPT and DALL-E from OpenAI. And the thoughts that I had in my mind was, so now that I know how to work with ChatGPT and it can produce articles and questions and stuff like that, is it really possible to have an artificial intelligence where you just enter the questions, I want to cure cancer, and the artificial intelligence then spits out the drug and the target and everything is solved? What is the state of the art in generative artificial intelligence in your field?
So sure. Well, again, generative AI as a term has been around for quite a while. I think that the term generative artificial networks, generative adversarial networks, sorry, was GANs, was coined by Ian Goodfellow in 2014 in a very famous paper that he co-authored with Yoshua Bengio, probably the highest cited researcher in AI. And in that paper, they've described how to utilize generative adversarial networks to imagine handwritten characters, for example. Since then, in just a year, the technology has progressed to the level where you could generate pictures that are of very high quality, where you can describe what you want to see, and GAN will create it for you. That was the year when we got into generative adversarial networks as well with molecules. So just like with a picture or with a handwritten character, you can describe the molecule you want, and the GAN will generate it for you with the desired properties using multi-parameter optimization techniques. And then since 2016, this technology has progressed pretty dramatically, right? So in 2020, you could generate pictures of people that are indistinguishable from photographs, right? Or almost indistinguishable. And nowadays, with these tools like DALL-E and Midjourney, generative technologies, now also transformer neural networks and other forms of generative AI became consumerized. So now consumers got access to those tools that we were using professionally for quite a while, and they have propagated into many industries. So Midjourney and DALL-E, for example, are now used to generate very valuable images from a single prompt. ChatGPT is now outperforming humans in some of the writing tasks, especially when language is not your first language. But in our field, in drug discovery, this technology has progressed quite a bit. So we synthesized and tested our first AI-generated molecule in 2017. That led to some considerable investment, but also established us as a player in this field. So there we designed small molecules against a specific target. So you basically take a protein crystal structure and tell your AI to design molecules that would be very selective and active against that specific protein target. and also could be drug-like, so something that is not a poison and can get into the body via oral administration, so not injectable, for example. And we've synthesized a number of those molecules, tested some, and published our first paper in 2018, submitted 2017. And then in 2019, we demonstrated a race where another company challenged us to design small molecules against a very well-known target in fibrosis. And we very rapidly generated small molecules, tested them against the target, and demonstrated that the generation conditions were confirmed using experiments. So that's 2019. And then we productized it. So we developed software around it with many, many, many different generative models for chemistry and for biology, and released it to the pharmaceutical companies. And now 10 out of the top 20 pharmaceutical companies have used our tools in one way or another. So it's actually pretty widespread in drug discovery. In longevity, generative techniques, we used them for the first time in 2017, where we used age as a generation condition. So that's where you can generate very high quality synthetic biological data for a person that does not exist, right? So for example, you can take yourself as a template, say, okay, well, I'm Christian, here is my gene expression profile, and I want to see how this gene expression profile looks like in 20 years. So you say, okay, well, generate according to this gene expression, 1,000 versions of Christian skin, for example, and show me different ages, right? So from, let's say, 40 to 50. And the system will generate a bunch of those gene expression profiles. You as a human would not be able to interpret it, but you would be able to trick pretty much every AI system that is trained to predict age using gene expression, right? And this approach allows you to also identify valuable targets, valuable genes that makes your gene expression profile younger or older, right? So just by basically moving this dial, which is age, back and forth on several biological data types, we can actually get valuable insights into what's making you older or younger, and also try to find causal relationships. So I think that generative AI will also help quite a bit study aging. We found some targets this way already, and we currently have the first drug that we've designed using generative AI for a novel target already in human clinical trials. So we just got the top line data from the phase 1 clinical study where we test safety. Now we're going into phase 2 for a very broad indication with no cure. But the way we found this target was also using aging research. So I think generative AI in biomedicine is very well established and very broadly used.
That's great. I had a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with Jack Scannell. He coined the term Eroom's law in 2010. And we were talking about the big problems that we have in drug discovery and drug development. And I would like to hear your opinion on what generative AI and artificial intelligence can do. I mean, the basic principle, you also said in some interviews that 90% of drug candidates fail in clinics. And when we look from coming from the lab bench, we are probably about 99% failure rate. And amazingly, the expenses for one drug in the last 10 years went up from roughly $1 billion per drug to $3 to $4 billion. How do you see that artificial intelligence, or how can artificial intelligence help to solve these problems, to make drug development faster, more accurate, and also cut back the costs? What is the role of generative AI in this field?
So sure, thank you for asking this question, because I would be able to answer first in numbers, right, with real facts, and then give you a little bit more of a futuristic view.
Super.
So as you know, our company, we raised just over 400 million but mostly it was in the last 2 years. So from mostly biotechnology investors who understand biotech. Last year, just in 2022, we nominated 9 preclinical candidates. So 8 internal and 1 for an external collaborator. And in small molecules, that's a very large number. Usually a big pharmaceutical company would nominate, 4, 5, 6. Sometimes when they're lucky, they can go, I don't know a big pharma company that nominated 10, for example, in a single year. It would be, usually they have a lot of programs, but many of them are external. And many of them are in biologics. So in small molecules, you usually don't have this pace of R&D. Usually to get to this point, to a point of preclinical candidate, you would, with all the failures, you would probably spend, well, as a biotech, probably around $100 million, right? If you're going after new targets. And in pharma, it's going to be even more expensive because they usually waste a lot of time and effort on all kinds of bureaucratic things, right? And just people do not focus and work as hard and fast as in biotechnology companies. So this improvement in and acceleration in drug discovery is real. So it's not just blah blah futuristic, right? So 9 preclinical candidates in a single year. We've demonstrated that. In 2021, we nominated only 2 preclinical candidates. And this year we expect to, hopefully exceed our internal record. And some of these drugs went into clinic. So usually by this time, the failure rate is very high. And again, we raised only 400 and we managed to get to preclinical candidate stage with now, since we started doing our own discovery, we managed to progress 11. It's a pretty big number. And you can compare drug discovery to space exploration, right? So first you need to launch your first rocket, right? Reach the orbit and or suborbital flights. But still with some payload delivery. And the most difficult one is your first, right? Or your second. But then when you demonstrate that it consistently works, you can do much more and also people start believing in it. So I think generative AI already transformed drug discovery and we have contributed significantly to this process because we also, in addition to using generative AI internally, we also gave it to other people in the form of software. So now a lot of people are using our software for target discovery. It's so easy to use that high school students can use it, and they do. For small molecule generation, it is not as easy to use, and we only deploy it within big pharma companies. But those that understand the value, instead of trying to say, oh, we can do a better job. By the way, if some of them say that, they can also implement some of their models in our software. So it's so flexible. But many of them are afraid of doing that because then if you don't outperform, well, you would have to rely on our software. Usually it's a good idea to do both. And I think that the cost component and the time component is not as important as the probability of success component, right? Because when you are using generative AI for both target discovery and small molecule chemistry, I think that you can significantly improve the probability of success because very often you would go after maybe not so hard targets, but when you have a choice of a target and you can very rapidly fast forward, you can find those combos that have not been previously explored because either people thought that it's maybe not a very competitive target, or it's a very difficult target, or this target might not address a substantial patient population, or is just too new. So they try to ignore this target because there is very little biology and biological evidence available around this target. And we managed to matchmake the target with the generated molecule in the most efficient way. We also try to forecast into the future and see which targets are going to be hot, because many of them are made for sale for big pharma companies, right? So we would not be able to progress many of them ourselves into phase 3, for example, right? It just, we won't be able to raise so much capital. When you are trying to do those 3 steps with generative AI, I think that you are significantly improving the probability of success, even from the strategy perspective, because many of those programs within big pharma companies, they fail because of strategic choice. So they actually just decide to pivot their strategic direction and refocus, for example, from oncology to CNS, or from one target discovery philosophy to another. They want to say, okay, we're going to go only for genomically validated targets, and then 70% of the pipeline is stopped or cut, and they just refocus, and a lot of that is wasted due to strategic reasons. So when you also try to extrapolate the kind of hotness of the target space into the future and try to see what is going to be valuable for big pharma companies from the strategic perspective, you can also minimize that risk. So I would be guessing right now, but I think that we can at least improve the probability of success by 50%. And that's more important than time and cost. And that's at least, right? Because for us internally, pretty much every program we tried has succeeded. So we failed a few times, but more than 90% of the time we succeeded to get to a preclinical candidate and into the clinic.
50%, the probability of success. From in which stage are we talking about? Clinical trials, or are we already earlier? So
I'm talking about earlier, much earlier. So from
really?
Target discovery stage all the way to, let's say, phase 1 clinical trials. And the reason I can say that is because currently we have just a few of those programs, right? And so far the probability of success was almost 100%, right? So 50% reduction in probability of success, in probability of failure, is my personal conservative estimate. And of course, we did it on a tiny fraction of the cost and in a fraction of the time. So in 2 years, 2.5 years, 11 preclinical candidates, it's a pretty cool number.
That's really amazing. So for my understanding, the numbers that I have in mind are that when we look earlier before preclinics, we have a success rate of 1%, and your programs have a success rate of 100%, basically, when I understood you right. So it means that you weed everything out that doesn't work very quickly and move only those compounds forward into preclinical development and clinical development that have a real high probability of success already. Is this the right understanding? Yeah,
well, that's I would say a little bit more ambitious way to explain it. But why don't I visualize and share a screen? I just need to have screen sharing privileges, and I'll just show your followers one slide, which is very important.
That's a good idea. You got the rights.
So here you go. That is the slide which describes, that's from Stephen Paul's paper, formerly at Eli Lilly when he published it in Nature Reviews Drug Discovery, very famous journal, which describes these different steps of drug discovery and development. And in his paper, he described just those steps from target to hit all the way to submission and launch, and showed that it costs about $1.8 billion, right, from target to hit. And here are the probabilities of success on the top. Here is the number of years it took. It usually takes. And here is on average the number of millions of dollars that every step costs. I added my own estimates to the slide, disease hypothesis and target discovery. That's usually performed in academia. not in big pharmaceutical companies. They very rarely discover good targets that get progressed into late-stage clinical trials. And here, the probability of success I estimated to be 1 to 5%, predominantly because currently the NIH, National Institute of Health, their budget annually is $45 billion, right? So they actually spend quite a bit of money, but there are very few good targets that reach the clinic. And usually it takes 1 to 10 years, could cost you billions of dollars. For example, Alzheimer's, we still don't know a single good target that would work for everybody, right? And the disease hypothesis is poorly understood. That's why we have to study aging to understand Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's understanding may help us understand aging a little bit more. So what we have done so far is we've taken one of our programs from discovery to phase 1 top-line data received, right? So basically we can refer to it as phase 1 complete. And we've done all this for this program. We haven't failed yet. So fingers crossed. We did it in under 3 years, right? So usually it would take you, 5.5, 6 years, sometimes a decade. And it would take you a lot of money, right? So basically close to $1 billion. We have done that on a fraction of the cost. So to reach the preclinical candidate stage at that time, just for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis indication, it took us about $3 million. Of course, we have tested it for many other indications, right? So we're taking it also for chronic kidney disease, that specific target. And we're doing indication expansions into skin fibrosis as well. It's one fibrotic target. But just that is a pretty cool number. And let me see if I can show some other interesting slides just to explain this process. And again, I will have to apologize one more time to your listeners for the background noise because I'm at the World Government Summit. So that is how long it took us to get to preclinical candidate stage with our antifibrotic. And again, this is the traditional approach. This is our approach. So under 18 months, under $3 million for IPF only. And then under 30 months into close to phase 1 complete when I made these slides. Now we're here. And again, we did it at a fraction of the cost. To my knowledge, it's the first AI-generated drug to reach human clinical trials and go through the phase 1 clinical trials. So we made a little bit of a history, hopefully.
Congratulations.
And even if we, do not succeed in phase 2, it was a very cost-effective journey compared to everything else. But we, of course, are aiming for major success. So this is the first drug where we managed to get all the way to humans. We actually conducted a phase 0 study. So a small study in a small number of humans, 8 humans in Australia, healthy volunteers. We call it phase 0 because, again, the target is new, right? So when we're a small company, we wanted to ensure that we understand the target and the compound distribution a little bit better. And then we started phase 1 trial in 80 healthy volunteers, just got the top line data. And these are all slides, but we have progressed with our target X. We haven't disclosed it. And we have several other very promising targets, including targets for COVID. So for C3-like protease, that one is ready to go human right now as well. And it's a very selective, broad spectrum molecule. So it works pretty much in every COVID strain that we've tested it against. And we also have a lot of cancer targets that are specifically tailored for licensing to big pharmaceutical companies. So we try to have very high quality data packages that will be very attractive to those kind of companies. And just to show you a case study that we published openly for everybody, so you can go back and trace our work. And we try to publish as much of our work as possible with open access. So we went after ALS, which is a very popular disease actually for all AI-powered drug discovery companies, but we try to do it in the open. It's a rare disease, but there are still a lot of patients out there, and very often when I speak with my friends, somebody knows somebody who had ALS or has ALS right now. We decided to use all of our software tools, PandaOmics, Chemistry for Intuition, and Clinical, that are available commercially right now for target discovery, small molecule chemistry, and prediction of clinical trials outcomes. And utilized PandaOmics, where we utilized massive amount of data available to us from public repositories for ALS and other diseases. We used multiple AI algorithms and AI models to come up with target hypotheses. Also got some textual evidence that some of those targets may be implicated in ALS. Explored various drug filters for exploring target, whether the target is good for small molecules or biologics, whether it's commercially viable. And then we partnered with the wonderful key opinion leaders in this field, Mary Chutkovitz, head of neurology at Harvard MGH, Jeffrey Rothstein, head of the Brains project, and very prominent neuroscientist, neurobiologist from Hopkins, Bailu from Tsinghua University, and Kejong from Mayo Clinic, to work with massive data sets from ANSWER ALS Consortium, where a lot of human ALS cells were reprogrammed into baby cells called iPSCs, and genetic profiles were evaluated, and also they were later programmed into full-scale neurons, also with all kinds of molecular data coming from the samples. And also we used a lot of samples from our own databases that are properly integrating and annotating massive amounts of public available data, ran it through PandaOmics and found new targets, and also older targets with drugs to repurpose. And then we tested those drugs very rapidly in a fly model from Mayo Clinic. So, when it comes to rare diseases, and especially the diseases of the brain, there are very few models where you can test your hypotheses, right? So you can test it on mice, you can test it in human neurons, you can try to grow them, or you can use a model organism like flies, for example, and do very quick tests. So we can find more information about this project at als.ai. We use this fly model from Mayo and demonstrated that in ocular neurons, where the G4C230 phenotype is observed, very similar to many ALS phenotypes that are observed in humans. Many of the drugs that we predicted, many of the targets worked and rescued the phenotype. So AI can pick the targets and very rapidly demonstrate strong rescue, moderate rescue, and mild rescue. And a few targets, of course, didn't work, right? And we've published it openly. And some of those drugs, some of those targets, they do have already existing drugs. And we've published those for repurposing. I know that there are some companies that are now trying those drugs and targets clinically. So that's one of the ways to test your hypothesis very quickly. And yeah, then we actually did our own chemistry. And I'm going to pause here because that's going to be a long story and with a lot of chemistry terms, and maybe it's going to be boring for your readers, for your listeners. But we managed to demonstrate that we can very rapidly with AI identify new targets and validate those targets either using knockouts or real chemistry, and for a very important disease with no cure, and then published rapidly, right? So we didn't even think about commercializing this when we published. And for many other diseases, we do something similar, but we do it internally.
In the first slides, if I remember it right, you said that you cut back the time that you need to bring a drug candidate into the clinics, and instead of, when I remember it right, it was about 414 million in the traditional way that a company needs to move a company in a drug candidate into phase 1, and with your technology, you did it for $3 million. Is this? Did I remember that right?
That's correct.
Wow.
So we managed to get to preclinical candidate stage just for IPF indication, because there you need to claim a preclinical candidate in our world. You need to demonstrate efficacy in several models, so at least 3. And we used one in vitro model and 2 mice models to demonstrate efficacy in for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. For other types of fibrosis, we of course did many other experiments that increased the cost pretty dramatically. Yeah.
So, but for proving what artificial intelligence can do in drug development, I think it's a good example, because you cut back the costs to 1%, or you can do 100 drugs at the same price of 1 with the traditional way. So it's basically, it's a very amazing feat. What was the response from regulatory authorities when you approached them with your artificial intelligence approach? Was it a no-brainer for them to say, okay, it's cool, move forward, or did you have some challenges to solve?
So of course we got some interest from the regulators, especially in Asia. So in China, the NMPA was very interested in our results, and we're in active discussions. And in the US, we got some interest. So I actually gave a talk, virtual talk at to the FDA, to one of the big departments, and we're trying to establish this connection. And basically, there, our program 1, which is going to human clinical trials phase 2, is going to be the highlight, right? So that's what we need to focus on right now. And have the tool that we really want the regulators to use. It's called Insilico, which predicts the outcomes of phase 2 to phase 3 transitions, and also interprets some of the likely failures and successes, right? So we're trying to make this tool available to the regulators as well. Currently, we're selling this to hedge funds and banks, to the financial industry, and also piloting with them to improve the tool. Because, of course, the industry that gets hurt the most by failures is the other VCs and hedge funds that are investing in those and banks that are investing in the companies that are running phase 2 clinical trials. That's where most of the failures are, and they usually either win a lot or lose a lot, right? So the ability to very rapidly predict success or failure and also interpret, I think that's key to the financial industry, but also to the regulators, because very often clinical phase 2s actually succeed, but later they fail in phase 3 because the clinical study was mismanaged somewhere. And our tools, again, hopefully will be able to allow to identify those mismanagements. Yeah.
What do you think in future? Is it possible to completely avoid clinical trials, to just predict the success with artificial intelligence and not do human trials anymore, unless we're in phase 3, or is it just?
No, you won't be able to do that. You need to do human clinical trials for sure.
Yeah.
Even with something. So right now, there are pretty much no medicines that work 100%, right? And many of the medicines that you think work, they actually work for the wrong reason. So I think that until we figure out how to simulate this entire world at the atomic level and also recreate it with many, many different people, we will require human clinical trials to be conducted. I just hope that the regulatory authorities will become much more aware of of the potential of generative AI and actually recent achievements, and start paying closer attention to what we do, for example, and try to get more involved and try to accelerate, right? So I think that currently the regulators would play a much more active role at accelerating the pace of technological progress. And very often we should actually think about how to make really rapid pilot runs where you try to set records in certain areas, right? So if I were a politician right now focused on improving the pharmaceutical industry, I would try to identify a few opportunities, for example, in rare diseases, where AI could be used end to end. And I would try to partner with a few companies, well, for example, like ours or with ours, to try to go from discovery to the clinic in the shortest amount of time possible. So you basically design a strategy, you say, okay, well, this is the disease I want to go after, preferably with a target that is not obvious, for example, like ALS, and then give us green light to conduct rapid clinical studies with novel small molecules and observe how those studies pan out, and also allow us to get the approval as quickly as possible, right? And for example, if you can tangibly demonstrate that you can do this within 4 years, for example, well, you just cut down the time by 60%, and you can demonstrate that the effective drug can go into humans, and I'm talking about to the market in a certain amount of time, and then you can benchmark against that pilot. So you need to have a few of those, going to the moon cases, preferably in a smaller scale for more rare diseases, but with poorly understood biology, in a race format, just to get better at regulating for bigger diseases, right? So I would try to do that. And currently, I don't know of any politician or regulatory authority that would be looking at this at scale.
No, it's interesting. I mean, with large scale studies in fields like COVID, for example, 40,000 patients, 40,000 people was easy to find. I was involved in 2 companies who did research in rare diseases, and the timelines in clinics were just not very attractive to VCs. I mean, when I approach VCs and say, look, we need 5 to 10 years to recruit enough patients, they're not very happy with that timeline and are reluctant to invest. Where do you see artificial intelligence in the field of clinical trial to really speed up when you don't find the patients? What can you do with that in artificial intelligence?
So sure. Well, again, if you go for China, for example, some of the rare diseases are not so rare. So you can do faster recruitment. And I actually think that for this kind of exercise in AI, that's one of the areas where international collaboration could help a lot, right? So currently we see a lot of what we call, trade wars between US and China specifically, and actual real wars where Russia invaded Ukraine, for example. But with the with rare diseases and races for AI-powered drug discovery, I hope that authorities could collaborate and maybe we could recruit some of those patients much quicker. And also, I'm pretty sure if the an agency like the FDA would prioritize our field in a bigger way, and specifically, look at how to conduct such an experiment, right? I'm pretty sure we could come to a conclusion very quickly. Would require just one day of a seminar or of meetings, workshops to come up with a proper strategy. I'm pretty sure that we can also get some significant financial backing from the private sector, because if the regulators would demonstrate that at the end there is some potential profit involved, right? So the VCs who would be funding something like this would have a big payout, plus a seat at the table for future races like that. I'm pretty sure we would be able to do that. But currently, nobody is motivated enough to go after those races. Of course, the COVID case was probably the best demonstration of abilities and also drawbacks and inefficiencies in the industry. So even the first drug that has been properly approved, Paxlovid, so Pfizer drug, it's still a very old molecule that is very rapidly repackaged as an oral C3-like protease inhibitor with another drug together that helps with CYP inhibition with better stability of the molecule. So it's definitely an imperfect drug that probably wouldn't go through in a normal environment. But during COVID, you've seen that they've managed to basically conduct all the clinical work in a year and a half, right? So that is something that the regulators are capable of. So now let's try and do that with a novel target, novel molecule, right? So why don't we try to increase the novelty and do another race, not wait for another pandemic.
Yeah, no, the pandemic was amazing. I mean, to see the whole industry move so quickly. We have one question from the audience. I will allow M. Kayesh, I hope I speak the name right, maybe to ask the question himself. Kayesh, you have the micro. Would you like to ask your question?
Hi, I'm really enjoy talking. I am Azam Kayase from Dubai. Thank you very much. I am proud of you, what you are doing. I asked you before, but I want to know after I listened to your lecture, artificial intelligence, microbiome based therapeutic tools. Can we apply what you are talking on the microbiome new molecule?
So absolutely. So if you have a very good microbial target, so expressed by bacteria, our AI can perform as well on this target as it does on human targets, as long as you have the crystal or you have a predicted crystal structure from AlphaFold or RosettaFold or some other algorithm. We could do similar things on microbial targets. Plus, we could look at new target discovery utilizing very similar tools like PandaOmics. And what we did specifically, so about 2017, I trained a deep neural network to predict human chronological age in a healthy state using microbiomic data, using whole genome sequencing data of human gut microbiome. And we got to reasonable accuracy for prediction of human age. Again, that's one of the features that is present in pretty much every data set, right? And we demonstrated which bacteria are more senopositive and senonegative, so contribute to you, quote unquote, looking younger to the deep neural network, or quote unquote, looking older to the deep neural network. And that showed you that deep neural networks can actually zoom into specific bacterial species that may perform certain roles, play certain roles in different biological processes. So in this case, in aging. There, of course, the causality is poorly understood, but we can at least narrow down to specific microbial species. And again, chemistry is chemistry. So in chemistry, we can develop small molecules, discover small molecules for bacterial targets, no problem. For disease target research, we can possibly narrow down to individual bacterial species, and then within bacterial species, we could identify possible targets just by looking at what proteins are important for the various biological processes within bacterial species. So there are many ways to integrate AI in drug discovery using microbiome. And I think that there are many companies, in addition to ours, that are actually doing maybe even a better job at target discovery using microbiome. I personally do not prioritize microbiome as a data type within Insilico, because we have many other data types to focus on. It's of course promising, but I think, again, from the drug discovery perspective, currently we are prioritizing other data types. So we like to have human proteins as targets.
Thank you very much. I am looking to work with you or under your umbrella. Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you.
Would love to explore any collaborations. Thank you.
Talking about collaborations, you mentioned that your company operates in the Middle East, in China, and I also think in the United States and in Canada. Why did you decide to go this way?
So we try to go after the best talent in the world. Very often we hire through competitions. And in Europe, for example, we used to hire through massive national competitions, hackathons. And then, for example, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we realized that much of this valuable talent from Europe could be moved to the Middle East. So I managed to get quite a bit of the quote-unquote AI refugees originally into Abu Dhabi. And then we realized that that's a great place to actually host talent, specifically AI talent. And we started hiring, and we grew the team to about 40 here. And that's one of the reasons for international expansion into the Middle East. China is a very special case. So much of the biomedical research and contract research infrastructure is in China. So they are, over the past 20 years, they invested over $500 billion into biomedical infrastructure and research infrastructure. So you don't need to own your own labs. You can actually hire contract research organizations to do it for you. For an AI-focused company, not the absence of this labs is actually a competitive advantage. So you have to, if you want to move quickly, you can actually move very quickly by outsourcing many different experiments to many different labs, do it in parallel, and also have redundancy, right? So very often one lab may screw it up, another lab may succeed. Which one do you go with, right? So then you repeat the experiments in both. Very often, if you do it internally and if you succeed in places where you should not succeed, and you proceed with the program, it will be very damaging in later stages. So we try to introduce quite a bit of redundancy when we are talking about experimental data. So China is very important. It's a very important place to do experiments. And if you do have resources there overseeing the large number of full-time equivalents within contract research organizations, you can get higher quality and faster speed, and even create an ecosystem of those contract research organizations that is very seamless and is better than having your own lab. Of course, we do have our own fully robotics laboratory as well, but relying on those CROs is key. And of course, Montreal, Canada is a great place to hire AI talent. That's the capital of artificial intelligence, one of the capitals. The second one would be Toronto. So still Canada, so proud to be Canadian. Taiwan, for example, great part of China where you can hire really amazing computational chemists. And in Hong Kong, we do have our target discovery group, which utilizes a lot of our AI tools to discover new targets. But actually, it's really unusual to have this geographic distribution. But for us, it works, and it makes us a much more resilient organization. And I think that this level of diversity helps us innovate at a broader scale.
Yeah, and you can make use of the best from all countries. So it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing the approach that you have. I like it. You mentioned before you have a fully intelligent robotics lab. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So sure. I already tested if I do show you the video via Zoom, it's not going to be of good quality and it's going to lag. So I'll just talk through it, and maybe you can post a link to this lab in comments. So we realized that now that we have demonstrated that AI can very efficiently identify new targets that actually get validated using real experiments, we can now do it at a higher scale, at a broader scale, and we wanted to automate this process of target discovery. So we're not reliant on this incremental data for target discovery, but we can now perform experimental validation of our algorithms much faster. So we have a lab where you can throw in a sample. Imagine that a sample comes from some animal model of disease, right? So you take a piece of animal tissue. I just don't want to use the human analogy, where you've got, for example, certain cancer of a specific tissue. You throw it into the robot picks it up, grinds it, microplates it, does quality control analysis, then sends it automatically into another room where part of the sample is being placed in the incubator. So you grow some of those cells or even primary tissue, or just store it. But part of the tissue goes into the high resolution imaging system, so it gets imaged. You also incubate some of this tissue with contrast markers, so you get high content imaging with fluorescence. So part of the sample gets destroyed. Then it gets sent to another room where you get omics data, so transcriptomics and methylation data, and several other data types. All this data goes back into AI. AI decides which targets are important in that specific sample and which drugs already work on these targets, picks those drugs from the libraries, and test them in a high throughput manner, different incubation times, different concentrations, and then every sample goes through the same exact cycle. So it gets imaged, it gets high resolution and also fluorescence imaging, and you get epigenetic data, and you get gene expression data, and plus other data types. And then you compare your predictions to the actual experimental data and see if the targets were found and if the compounds work. And in parallel, you also try to find some novel biology, so find some novel biological hypotheses that might be valuable in the future. So this lab is more of a target discovery plus target validation lab. Now we are miniaturizing it. We're trying to make it smaller. So you can even do this at the hospital level. Imagine if you could do personalized drug discovery for individual patients.
Wow.
Or perform some already established personalized medicine services or decision support services for physicians, and at the same time discover targets. So you could place those labs in regions that never even aspired to be a player in biotechnology.
How small can you make it?
I think I can do it in 2 rooms.
In 2 rooms. This is
Yeah.
practically you can do it everywhere. Then it's not.
Yeah. Currently, is the entire floor which is automated,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty complex system. So it's many rooms performing different tasks with many different types of equipment. I think if I try to place this equipment in 3D and also make some of my own equipment, I would be able to automate this process with just 2 rooms.
So it's possible to run the processes in every hospital of the world, basically with
well,
2-3
every
rooms.
major one that can afford something like that, yeah. Or if there is a government program that allows you to do something like that. So currently, that's a dream, right? But I cannot guarantee you that we will have a hospital-based robot. But 3 years ago, I did not even dream about the lab that we have.
Yeah, this would be my final part for this conversation. So looking into the future, but before I ask that, we're coming to the end of the podcast. Is there any question open that you would like me to ask? Is there anything that I missed that you think is important to share?
Well, I think that you covered pretty much everything. I must say that the most important disease that we have in the world is actually aging. Because we will all lose function and die. And in this process, we will also get a bunch of diseases and trauma, and it's never a happy ending. So it's always loss of function. So I think that we need to look at and prioritize therapeutics that have dual purpose, that can treat a disease, but at the same time target important biological processes that are implicated in aging. And what we do at Insilico, and what I do in general, is looking for those dual purpose therapeutics. So I think being dual purpose, aging and disease, that's truly key for identifying blockbuster drugs, because the probability that your drug is going to work for many people at the same time is going to be higher if you are addressing a very broad biological process. And second, we need to figure out aging, right? Because that's the main killer. So this year, 60 million people are going to die due to aging. It's more than any war or any cataclysmic event or any plague. And we need to figure out how to increase health span and significantly delay death.
Do you think it's possible to delay death? I mean, there was a science fiction book that I read, I think 40 years ago, where the assumption was that one day some pharma industry in an alternative reality will develop a drug that basically makes death a conscious decision. So people don't age, people don't get sick anymore. Do you believe it's possible to come to that point in our reality somewhere in the future?
So with pharmacological means, I'm talking about small molecule drugs or biologics or even RNA therapeutics, you won't be able to dramatically increase lifespan. So I'm talking about maybe, plus 40-50% is probably possible if you combine a bunch of therapeutics that A, intervene with your metabolism, and B, improve certain repair functions, and maybe even stimulate certain biological processes that are just too expensive for the body to run all the time, or where we do not have a biological program. So I think that significant life extension is possible using pharmacological means, but not dramatic. To go dramatic, you need to look past pharmacology. It's just pharmacology is the most credible way to extend lifespan, and it's also something that is very sustainable. So if you are very good at discovering and delivering novel therapeutics for diseases, and you are also prioritizing aging as your primary outcome measure, so the effects on the health span and lifespan of your patients, I think that this is the area where you can achieve commercial success, and then fund other areas of longevity research that may give you more longevity dividend compared to just pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in the lifestyle. Pharmaceutical is one way, lifestyle is another way, and probably with Neuralink or with Elon Musk research that's going in that direction, maybe one day it's possible to upload consciousness into the cloud and download it to an artificial intelligence or to a robot.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on that, but it's definitely a very promising area of research for other purposes, also aging and Alzheimer's, CNS diseases. But yeah, I could look at maybe gradual replacement of neuronal tissue as the way to rejuvenate the brain. But uploading, that's something that we may not be able to master. I mean, creating a copy, yes, but is it going to be you? Most likely not. Why not create a clone then, right?
Yeah. That's the big question. I have one final question left when we are talking about the future. How do you envision generative AI and robotics impacting the future of healthcare and medicine?
Well, I think it's already impacted in a massive way. And partly due to our work in generative chemistry and generative biology in 2016, 2017, 2018, so seminal work. And now it has propagated. So I think that generative AI is going to transform our life beyond recognition in every way, right? So we are actually moving into the new era of knowledge management. So instead of retrieving knowledge through search and by browsing the different directories, we can now generate knowledge and complete response to your queries with reasonable accuracy. This accuracy is expected to improve over time, and you would be able to get purpose-built systems for discovery. So just like our Pandaomics platform, but even more reliant on generative AI with much better user experience, and perhaps conversational AI. And yeah, I think that we're getting into the area where generative AI will play a role in pretty much every area of drug discovery and development. Most important area where I see the application of generative AI is the ability to generate high quality synthetic patient data, right? So currently people are just too sensitive about their healthcare data being misused for all kinds of purposes. By the way, I do not know many cases where people were hurt by having their health data accessed. They're hurt by having their financial records, for example, accessed, or credit card information, identity information, but healthcare information very rarely. There are a lot of hypotheses, but insurance companies are regulated, right, and prohibited from using genomic information for discrimination. So for drug discovery, I think we should be able to use this information. However, since people are so afraid of sharing their biological data, we can now use AI to generate high quality data instead of taking it from specific individual. just by asking AI to generate specific biological data sets with desired properties, trained on publicly available data.
That's a great future. That's a great future. Alex, thank you very much for your time. And on the World Government Summit. And I wish you and your team all the best for the future. You're doing an amazing work. And I believe your team will move the healthcare industry globally forward. And enjoy the summit.
Well, thank you, Christian. I again apologize to you and your listeners and people who watch this for the background noise and also for the kind of presentation from the field. I just couldn't change it and I couldn't escape. So thank you for bearing with me.
It gives a nice flavor to the episode. I like it. Thank you very much, Alex, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.